What's going on, Mad Hatters, and welcome back for some meta madness. And I've got to be up front. I was wrong. Okay, I know. What a surprise. Last week, I said Amethyst Steel was a fluke. I said that it wasn't going to be the top dog after last weekend because people are going to get their hand on Cindy's and other things. And yeah, that didn't happen. Amethyst Steel, spoiler alert, has the highest win rate and the most played deck this past weekend. So yeah, we'll look at that. Okay, we've got 7, maybe 8 events to look at. We're looking at the first and second place list from these events, and then a third place list if anything piqued my interest. It's going to be a little bit quicker. A lot of people are reporting to Inktex these days, so there's a lot of lists to look at, and we're going to kind of see what's going on. And yeah, let's just look at them. Let's look at the meta first, all right? So let me switch screens here. We'll go to this, and then we'll jump here, and here's the breakdown, all right? This is the top 8 breakdown, and then we'll look at another meta report after this, but this is the top 8 breakdown from the events that happened this past weekend. 2 things to note. 2 events did not report the first place list, okay? So the first place wins is going to be a little wonky because of that. The numbers are going to be off because of that. And with that being said, though, Purple Steel, 22 in top 8, 13 in top 4, and 3 taking first place wins. So it had the most top 8s, which is to be expected when it's the most played deck, and you see that on the next slide. You expect it to have the most top 8s, right? And then what you really want to see is that it doesn't have the most first place wins, because if it's the most played deck like we've seen Blurple in the past, then if it doesn't have a lot of first place wins, then that means there's something that can counter it really well. And what this tells us with 22, 13, 3 is that we got to go to the lab, because there's nothing that's really countering Purple Steel. And that's what makes it so good, is that it has so much reach, it has so much draw now, it has ways to just answer things you play with Hades, which says it's a Dragonfire or a Friends on the Other Side built into a body, and Demona can turn your Prince Philip sideways so you can't set up the combo, and there's just a lot going on with the list right now. It also has Strength of the Raging Fire, one of the strongest cards in Lorcana. It has a lot. So somebody has got to save us, all right? We need some meta doctor to come in here and really show us what's up, because Purple Steel is looking like a monster. Next up, though, we've got Green Blue, our Baja Blast. We've got that 13-7-2. So that's really impressive, to be honest. With 13 top 8, 7 and 2, with so much Purple Steel, you'd expect the Baja Blast kind of falls off a little bit, because historically, it doesn't do great against Purple Steel. One thing that it has going for it, though, is Cinderella. And what I mean by this is that they play Cinderella on turn 3, and then turn 4, they can play something like John Silver. And what that does is it gives them a body that prevents Purple Steel from questing. It gives them a big body that can trade. And Cinderella can do things like Sing You're Welcome or Mother Knows Best and stuff like that. And then later in the game, you can play things like Spooky Sight and Sudden Scare to help control the board that way. And so there's some things that Baja Blast isn't looking like a bad option if you really want to counter what Purple Steel is trying to do. Next up, though, is Blue Steel with 9-2-0. So the deck that everyone's been afraid of for quite a bit is not doing so well. It didn't do very well last weekend, and it didn't do well this weekend either. Next up, Green Yellow Aggro 6-4-1. Green Yellow really being a top dog, if you know what I mean, in that one of these green yellow lists was Circle of Life. The first place was not Circle of Life, it was just not Churna Dogs, but Chroma Dogs, right, running the Emerald Chromicon. So of the top 8, I believe 4 were on Emerald Chromicon and 2 were on Circle of Life. And then we've got Blurple. All right, a lot of people thought Blurple was dead, but Blurple won a really big event. They had 5 top 8s, 3 top 4s. And then we have Green Steel, which is wrong. That should say Green Purple. All right, that's 5-1, taking 1 first place finish that we'll look at. Amber Steel Aggro. A lot of people saying Aggro's dead, and we had 3 in top 8. None taking top 4 or first. So not looking super promising. Might be some stuff to figure out, though. All right. And we'll kind of talk about that later on. And then finally, Red Purple. In Red Purple, I suspect we'll see a surge. I really do. With 2 in top 8, 2 in top 4, and 1 taking first place, that's pretty good. It was a smaller event with 23 people. We'll look at that towards the end, but Red Purple has a lot of things to really punish Purple Steel, especially if Purple Steel is building to try and beat Blue Steel. And we'll talk about that, but Red Purple really counters the current Purple Steel really well. So Red Purple might become a deck to beat. It might be that deck, that off meta thing you play if you want to go into an event with something no one's expecting. Let's look at the next slide though. The next slide, of course, is from Inktex. This is the Inktex Matrix. And when I mentioned that Purple Steel has the highest played and the highest win rate, this is what I'm talking about. We're looking at down, we got the 5 decks. So we got Purple Steel on a 55% win rate, followed by Blue Steel, Green Blue, Blurple, and Green Yellow. And again, these numbers will change as we go on. This is the last 2 weeks of numbers, and I suspect that this number, like I said, will change as people kind of figure out the decks a little bit more. I do believe there's still a lot to be found, right? Red Purple still being discovered, and we see a lot of people having a lot of success with that as it's found a new way to play the game. And meanwhile, Purple Steel is still doing the same thing it's always done and always wanted to do. So there's a lot to be figured out as we continue to go on. And we'll talk about that when we get into the list. But one last thing before we look at the list, we've got the Whispers in the Well Build a K event at Safari Zone Collectibles. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to want to miss this, all right? This is a $30 buy-in, a $30 event with the potential for a 6.6K payout, all right? That is massive, all right? That is really good. And what I mean by that is that all $30 of your buy-in is going to go into the prize pool. And then at 100 people, the prize pool will double, okay? The prize pool will double. So if we get 110 people at the event, that means $3,300 doubled for a 6.6K event. On top of that, we're going to have side events for $10 entry into a win-a-box, so you can win yourself a box of Whispers. We're going to have bounties from Incognito, as well as the Mad Hatters. And then you get 2 packs, all right? You get 1 pack for your entry, and you get 1 pack for giving us a printed deck list. That's a deck list that is printed from your computer and not your own handwriting, so it's easy to read. So you get 2 packs, $12, so you already get $12 back for your $30 entry, and the potential to win a 6.6K event. Pretty good, if you ask me. Pretty good. All right, that's the QR code down below for the Player Hub. If you're interested, get in the Player Hub. Come down to Smyrna, Delaware. It's going to be a really good time. I promise. We have a lot of really exciting things happening for this event. But ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into the deck list. And first up, we have the Hungry Dragon 34-player event. As a reminder, when we look at this page on the right here, we will have the first place, or sorry, on the far left, so right here, we'll have the first place, and then we'll have second place. So in finals, we had Green Blue duking it out with Blue Steel, and then top 8 was 4 Green Blues, all right? So that's quite a bit. Then it makes you wonder, did those Green Blues beat out Purple Steel for the top 8 positions? Maybe, but let's look at them. First up, we've got Green Blue with something a little bit spicy, and if you look in the upper right hand corner, you're going to see Max Goofs, and this is indeed spicy in my opinion. This is something that we've seen people talk about, but I haven't seen a lot of people have a whole bunch of success with it. And what that Max Goof is going to do, it's a shift 4, which doesn't apply here because we don't have the baby goof. But when this character quests, you may play a song with cost 4 or less from your discard for free, then put it on the bottom of your deck instead of in your discard. So that Max Goof, of course, letting you recast Malicious Mean is Scary, Mother Knows Best, 1 jump ahead, and you're welcome to help control the field, which is pretty good if you ask me. Meanwhile, only on 2 Hades, so they've gone with a 2-2 split of Hades into Mother Knows Best, so that kind of something to be noticed as well. But when you're running when you're running Max Goof, you're gonna want more of those songs, right, to really get the value out of Max Goof. So again, Cinderella package, you're going 2-4-6, ramp on 2, Cinderella ramping you to 4, and then on your turn 4, you're playing a 6 cost character. So that's why we see the Max Goof come into into play, because it's like what I talked about earlier. If you go Tipo into Cindy into John Silver or Max Goof, on your next turn, Cinderella could sing You're Welcome, and then Max Goof could re-sing You're Welcome to take control of the board at that point. And that's pretty good, especially if you go into Clarabelle your next turn and you just made them draw 4 cards. So really interesting list. We're on 4 develops and 4 visions. One thing I'd like to see in the list instead of over a spooky sight would be an under the sea. I think I personally like that a little bit more. I think where you're running 4 develops and 4 visions, you have a much better opportunity to sing under the sea. So I'd be curious, Caesar, if you had any thoughts on that. But I do love the one jump ahead. I love the extra opportunities to seeing turn 2 ramp, because we all know when blue does not see turn 2 ramp, they might as well just concede and move on to the next game. So really cool list, Caesar. I really like how you're utilizing the aspects of what Cinderella can give you. And then next up, we've got Ralphie Torres on Blue Steel. And the one thing that pops out for this list is the Ink Runner. All right, so this is a pretty normal Blue Steel list. We're on the 4 Captain Hooks, which there is that argument. Do we run Captain Hooks? Do we not? Do we run Pleakley? Do we not? This list, no Pleakleys. We are on the Ink Runner though. And what Ink Runner's doing is it's a 2-cost item. When you play this item, draw a card. So it filters. That's nice. You exert this item, you pay 1 ink, chosen character gains alert this turn. So historically, Blue Steel could really suffer into a heavy evasive meta, as that's what we're in right now. But now, where you have things like Thunderbolt, you have things like Strength of a Raging Fire and Ink Runner, now those decks can no longer hide behind all those evasives if you're able to get that Ink Runner down. So really interesting choice. We're on the 2 spooky sites. Again, a card that really makes me nervous, because this weekend, out of all the Amethyst Steel that I watched, I don't know if I saw an Amethyst Steel deck lose because of Spooky Sight. If anything, every time I saw a Spooky Sight played, I saw the Amethyst Steel player win. So I don't know if Spooky Sight is the card. It scares me a little bit, as you can imagine, right? But the rest of the deck, I love Headless Horseman. One thing to know, no Beyond the Horizon in this list. So that no Beyond the Horizon is going to be a little bit dangerous into a heavy green-blue meta, which this was, because now with no Beyond the Horizon, this green-blue deck can kind of just go ham and draw to their heart's content and not worry about a Beyond the Horizon possibly taking their hand down. Next up on the list, we have Triad TCG, and their top 8 looking at some Baja, a lot of blue, right? A lot of blue, and the 1 purple steel to make it. 1 purple steel in finals against green blue, with purple steel taking the win. And when we go forward, we got our boy Wochuk. A lot of people know him as the steel song player that really put Gaston on it and instead decided to go away from the shift lines, and Wochuk going back to purple steel, the other deck that he's really come to be known for. And what I really like about this list is our boy Mayor Winddancer. Mayor Winddancer, the 4-cost uninkable 5/7/1, just a beefy boy. All right, that 5/7/1 is just letting you trade with anything that's not evasive. It's annoying. It's power with Demona, it's power with Cheshire Cat. It's just doing a lot. One thing that does stand out with this list though, 1 dock. Wochuk is only running 1 dock, which is something that it gives you a little bit of extra draw. A lot of the times though, in the past with purple steel, we see 4 docks, but you'll see that's kind of changing a little bit. The other thing, 4 Pete's. And so there's a lot of more spicy things going on with this list that we don't normally see, but I do like the 1 Madam Mim Skater, the tiny adversary, giving everything Challenger +1. That's gonna be a pretty big deal, and it just allows for more effective trades that otherwise couldn't be done, which is going to be really effective. We're on the 4 Strength of a Raging Fire, so no Thunderbolt. So one thing I like about this list is it has a lot of the same core, but it's definitely different than some of the other lists that we're going to see, with a few of the different card choices. So really good job, Wochuk. Alex, way to go. Next up, we've got Mitchell taking 2nd place. Another Max Goof. All right, we got another Max Goof sighting again, going 2-4-6. John Silver or Max Goof is pretty good. Now, one thing that comes from this list, we're did not split the Hades and Mother Knows Best. So he decided to go straight up for Hades. So losing some of that value from Max Goof. At this point, your Max Goof is really only looking to high roll, like a really, really, really good hand, or just have a 4/5 body that comes down on 4. I don't know if that's quite worth it. I think you really want the 2 split. That way you can have a little bit more songs, because you're not really singing Malicious, Mean, and Scary. I mean, you could clear some 1-drops. You could clear like some cards with only 2. So there's possibility. There's possibility. I do like, though, the Under the Seas over Spooky. Again, when you're running 4 and 4 of Develop and Vision, that's a lot of opportunity to find that Under the Sea, because you can't hold Under the Sea anymore. When all of yellow decks run Mowgli, when all of green decks run Ursula, as far as the aggro decks go, you can't hold Under the Sea in your opening hand, because you will lose that Under the Sea. So you have to have Visions or Develop to find that Under the Sea once you have all the cards to be able to sing it together. Next up, we're on Bend to My Will, which I think is an incredibly important card. It just helps in the mirrors, right? Just one of is plenty, because if you don't need it, you can ink it with Cinderella. And then finally, the 1 jump ahead. You might as well try and maximize your opportunity to not lose on turn 2. Really cool list, Mitchell. I like it. I like it a lot. Next up, we've got the Encounter 3K, which was just north of me up in Philly. And this one was quite a doozy, because we had 5 purple steel lists make top 8, where they did split top 8, but 2 players decided to play it out, and that way they can try and get the Orlando PPG bye, where Melissa ended up taking first. Spoiler alert. But we had 2 purple steel decks in finals, so let's take a look at them. First up, we've got, of course, Melissa taking first place at this event, running purple steel. And one thing that stands out here is that Melissa's been on green yellow dogs for a hot minute. She released a guide last set. She's had a lot of kind of influence on green yellow dogs, and in a time where I think green yellow dogs is in a really good place, she comes out with purple steel. And I've got to imagine it's because she's been playing in the local scene and saw that green yellow dogs might not be in the best position when you have so much purple steel. We'll see. But looking at the list, it is something that I was talking about with the red purple deck. So we saw Wojciech's list earlier, and now we have Melissa's list, and it is very different. And what I mean by that is we see these Timothy Q mouses come in, as well as the Tinkerbells. What's happening here is that they're trying to find a way to beat the blue steel decks, because you don't want to go super late with them. You can, because you have things like Giant Cobra. In Melissa's list, you have things like White Rose, you have Hades, but you still don't want to do it. So what's happening with these Timothy Mouses and these Tinkerbells is they're trying to get a whole bunch of lore early before blue steel starts getting things going, and it's working for them. But while they do this, we have other decks like red purple that are coming in that are saying, I want to play against purple steel, because I will run them over with things like Headless Horsemen and all these other cards that I have that will trade really well into you and leave me with a positive tempo swing. So it's in an interesting place, because if purple steel slows down and takes things like Timothy Q Mouse out, then they are going to lose to blue steel. But if they stay like this and red purple gets more popular, they're going to lose to red purple. So what are you more afraid of? The deck that you know everyone's going to be running, or the deck that probably not a lot of people will be running? And so that's the question that purple steel players have to ask themselves. But we saw a lot of Timothy Q Mouse and Tinkerbell this past weekend. It's become a hot thing when you can just quest out before blue steel gets going, and that's what they're trying to do at this point. So really good job, Melissa. Really good read on the meta as well. And then next up, we've got Royce, and I wanted to show off Royce because we showcased him in the last set, and Royce has been another big voice in dogs last set as well as this set. And what's going on with this list is he made a couple changes. He was in the video last week. One of the big changes, though, is he recognized the power of Emerald Chromicon and increased from 2 to 4, and that was definitely the move, because when Royce showed up to this event, purple steel was the most represented deck at this event, even surpassing blue steel. So Emerald Chromicon comes in, and I'm sure that Royce did not dodge them all day long to get into that top 8. So I'm sure Emerald Chromicon put in a lot of work. So much so that people are starting to tech in Benja. When you have people like Diego and Royce that are playing a lot, And a lot of dogs, we're seeing a lot of people start taking in Binja just for, well, some of these top green yellow dog players. So with that, you're changing the meta, man. Congratulations. That's a pretty big accomplishment. But good job. Great run into a meta that really is not favored for you. So it really showcases how good that green yellow dogs, what kind of position they are in right now. And then next up, we've got our Madverse CCQ, and that is green, yellow, and purple steel taking finals. 322 players, a top 8 that 5 different decks in top 8. We've got green, purple, our first showing in top 8. Blurple, purple steel, of course. So a little bit of what is the current meta, to be honest. But you'll notice no blue steel. No green blue either. But first up, we've got Shorty. So Shorty taking first against Purple Steel with Chroma Dogs. And Purple Steel's supposed to beat Chroma Dogs. So what happened? Well, Mowgli is pretty good. Mowgli definitely helps because Mowgli's letting you take those. That's an extra way to take a song out of their hand, which is a really big deal. One of the ways that Purple Steel is able to beat the green yellow dogs decks is by blowing their stuff up with Strength of a Raging Fire, Thunderbolt now. But now what happens is you play something like Mowgli on turn 2, you rip the song out of their hand, you can develop this board, you get the tramp down. Next thing you know, your tramp finds you another tramp and then another tramp, and then you play a lady, and lady brings you back some 1-drops, and it just gets nasty. It gets really, really nasty really, really quickly. And I think Mowgli's a big reason behind that, because Mowgli is just giving you another way to rip songs from Purple Steel. Also, you have Emerald Chromicon, that Emerald Chromicon letting you be able to just bounce that Purple Steel stuff back to your opponent's hand. And so a lot of different things going on. And you know, one like that's making green yellow have a really good shot. All right, you see the 1 Webby, so that has to be respected. Is there going to be a turn 2 shift Webby coming down? You'll notice one difference between Shorty's list and Royce's list is no Scrooge McDuck. That Scrooge McDuck questing for 2 when it's banished, return to hand, and also gets to filter your deck. So that is a key difference as well. But you can kind of see why the deck might be in a good position against Purple Steel. And then we got Wojdi taking second place against the green yellow dogs, and their list not much different than what we've been seeing. Again, we see the, in this case, only 2 and 2 split of Timothy Mouse and Tinkerbell, and then we see a lot of the cards that Dogs doesn't want to see. We see the Calhouns, we see the Cheshire Cats, which is going to be really annoying because that can move damage and things like that. We have the Demona now, so Elsa and Demona making your opponent turn sideways. But here's the thing. When that dog deck can go super wide and develop this big board that can quest down in 2 turns, the game's generally over by the time Demona comes down, especially if you don't have a song to slow them down. So they develop this board. Again, they play the tramp, which finds them another tramp, which finds them other key cards. Next thing you know, they quest down into 2 turns, and you never even have a chance to play your Demona to try and control their board. Also, your Timothy Mouse and your Tinkerbell are not trading into anything on a dog board. So that's a big deal as well. So we're seeing how green yellow dogs is starting to be able to find a way to counter arguably their worst matchup, because Purple Steel is trying to counter what is their worst matchup, which is blue steel. The meta is going to be crazy. The meta is still wide open. Do not for a second believe that the meta has been solved, because ladies and gentlemen, CCS is going to be crazy. DLC Richmond is going to be absolutely insane. Like, this is crazy. This is a wild time for Lorcana. Then next up, we've got PB Timo with an Amber Steel list that I had to showcase because it is pretty unique. We see kind of the Rapunzel bodyguard package coming on. We have Aurora plus Tiana, and then pretty normal, right? Well, not really, but then we see Mickey Mouse coming in. So Mickey Mouse giving all your characters +2, as well as being a Singer 8. And then we see Search for Clues. A 4-cost action, the player or players with the most cards in their hands chooses and discards 2 cards. If you have a detective character in play, gain 1 lore. This list has no detectives, to note. Maybe you could change that by including the 2/3 2-cost bodyguard that is a detective, but what's happening with this one? An aggro deck that's playing an action. Well, when you make your opponent discard their last 2 cards, that can be a pretty good turn, especially if they're trying to set something up. So if you're on the play and they're getting ready to sing Strength of a Raging Fire, you search for clues and now they can't. That's pretty good. That's pretty good because Purple Steel, for example, no longer can take out your Tiana. Pretty good. All right. And then we have something like I Won't Give In, and this is a song. Return a character card with cost 2 or less from your discard to your hand. So that's really interesting because what I Won't Give In is letting you do is, well, a lot. You could bring back Mowgli to search for, dig for more actions from your opponent's hand. Non-characters. You could bring back Doc, which is going to be a really popular one. You could bring back Nala's. Like, you get the point. There's a lot of cards that you could find extremely helpful in your current situation with I Won't Give In. Whether it is Docs, which that might not be the answer every time. It could just be I Won't Give In to get a Nala. And what's really exciting about I Won't Give In is it gives Mowgli a reason to be in your deck besides just the initial on-play effect. Mowgli being a quest for 1 can be kind of weak because you have a lot of cards only questing for 1, but Mowgli's effect is so good that it can't be ignored. So you run Mowgli and then he can sing I Won't Give In, and that's pretty effective. That's a really good use of Mowgli at that point that otherwise might not be super useful. I really like the list, man. I'm excited to see how it grows with seeing what people do with it. Next up, we've got Tavern of Souls Gaming. They did a Land of Enchanted 1K with 31 players. We had a Baja Blast Finals. One thing to note, top 8 had... That is not the right top 8 showing. So we had a Baja Blast Finals. Ladies and gentlemen, ignore everything else that's on the right, okay? But moving on from that, we got CPAC taking first place. And so CPAC taking first place with his list. And this is kind of similar to what we noticed earlier. One of the very first lists that we looked at for Green Blue, except what's happening with this list is we don't have any of the Max Goose. All right, no Max Goose, so no Mother Knows Best. And what's happening now is we have the Donald Ducks, we have the 4-way Hades, and then the 1 Spooky Sight, but also on the 4 Visions, 4 Develop. So a very clean list overall. And what's happening is you're just trying to be consistent with what's going to happen. You still have your 2, 4, 6, right? Your only 6 drop is John Silver, but you don't mind dropping a Donald Duck either, or just using a Develop and a Visions to search your deck for whatever you may need, because now on turn 6, maybe you search for that Clarabelle that you really want, or you have a Clarabelle in hand, so you search for your Welcome. That could be an option as well, or maybe you really need that Spooky Sight. That's a pretty good option as well. So a lot of good things going on here. The 4 of Hades feels great. The 2 Prince Phillips, just the baby Prince Phillips, just really stalling your opponent, because now your opponent has to play this game of, do they have the combo or not? Because your opponent doesn't want to go to late game with you. So they have to play through it knowing that the combo could come down and it could be game over at that point, because that Prince Phillips questing for 3 every turn or challenging evasives, and then you're also playing something like Basil next turn or Clarabelle next turn. So a lot of really nasty things from a list like this. And then next up, we've got Mufasa with a really, really cool list, because we've got a Mufasa in it. And Mufasa is an interesting card. Of course, it's an 8 cost uninkable, which isn't that big of a deal when you have something like Cinderella. It's a 4/9/4, so a lot of questing power. And remember, when you play this card, you shuffle your Inkwell, and then 2 cards go back into your hand. So you lose 2 ink, but whenever this character quests, ready all cards in your Inkwell. So if he gets to quest, there's a lot of things you can do at that point. And, shout out to our local Kyle Zuglies. He has a really cool list with Mufasa. It's a blue steel list that I think is going to do really well. And because Mufasa is just a card that people forget about, that is, if it goes, it's probably game over. 1 quest and it's not looking good for you. But the other really cool thing about this list is the Ink Geyser. Ink Geyser, one of my personal favorite cards. It was one of my favorite lists to run last set. It's a 3 cost uninkable. Each player exerts all the cards in their Inkwell. Then each player with more than 3 cards in their Inkwell returns cards at random from their Inkwell to their hand until they have 3 cards in their Inkwell. So it just resets everything. So you have things like Kita, which you play a Kita and then you play an Ink Geyser, and Kita can then start ramping your ink again. And if you inked T-Pose, you're gonna get your T-Pose back. If you use Cinderella to ink a Cinderella, you get a Cinderella back. So a really cool card, and you can kind of play Ink Geyser in place of Bend to My Will, depending on how you want to go about doing that. So really neat list. I'm a big fan. Ink Geyser and Mufasa. I mean, what's not to love? Next up, though, we've got the Secret Rare Series, a 28-player event with a purple, steel, and green-yellow finals. So looking at that, we've got Eaglem taking first place with a list that, again, is a little different. So this one is closer to what Wochuk ran for his event, where we have the one Doc and then none of the Timothy Mouse and the none of that other card, the Tinkerbell. So this list probably better suited to beat green yellow because it doesn't run those cards that just trade really badly with that. So instead your 2-drops are things like Violet Saberwings or Calhouns and Black Herons, and not cards that quest for 2 but only challenge for 1. Then we have, of course, the Yzmas, which we haven't seen in any list. That Yzma, of course, when you turn it, if you have fewer than 3 cards in your hand, you draw until you have 3 cards in your hand. So helping you find a lot of the answers you need, while you also have Hades to draw, Genie to draw, Doc to draw, Diablo to draw, and, of course, Demona and Dumbo to draw. Purple Steel draws a lot of cards now. Okay, a lot of cards now when you have really dangerous cards like something like Strength of a Raging Fire and Cobras and all these nasty ways to just close the game. So Purple Steel coming in clutch, winning that first place finish, and then Green Yellow Circle of Life, and I was wrong. All right, Green Yellow Flugel, I think, took second place with his Green Yellow Circle of Life in a very different deck than Green Yellow Aggro. This deck can do some wild things. I think wild. I think there was an ICL event where the player had 2 ink and had 32 ink worth of cards on their side of the board. That is disgusting. That is crazy to be able to do that. And what's happening is you're playing cards like Pluto and Huey, and that's going to ramp you, and then you have Bobby to discard some of these high cost characters, or you go Pluto, Huey, Tramp, and then Tramp discards those high cost characters, and then you play the Stitch for free with Circle of Life, or you play you sing Malicious Mean and Scary, and then you play the Prince Philip for free with Circle of Life, or you get the Mickey Mouse down, and then Mickey Mouse can sing Circle of Life to play these big high cost cards. And then meanwhile, all of these cards that only quest for 1, you play something like a Scar, and then you use Scar to sing Malicious, Mean, and Scary, and then they all challenge into those things that took 1 damage, and you draw 100 cards. Like, there is some nasty things that this list can do when it gets going. I just haven't been able to get it going. So kudos to you, Flugel, because I love the list. I think these green yellow Circle of Life decks are really cool. I love Circle of Life. I just think you have to be a pretty special pilot to be able to pilot this to success. So kudos to you, man, with a really neat deck. Next up, we've got Dark Wings taking 6th place, and I had to showcase this because shout out to Brainiac, right? In a very different list than if you guys have been watching what I've been playing. This is very different, and what's going on with this list is he's going hard to be able to counter a lot of these aggro decks and a lot of these purple steel decks. When you run something like Royal Guard that trades really well, and then you have Maleficent and Nana that are both controlling your opponent's board. Maleficent, whenever this character quests, you may choose and discard a card to return chosen character, item, or location would cost 3 or less to their player's hand. So Maleficent coming down, questing for 2 every turn, and bouncing these big purple steel cards that they really need. Those like just really anything that they're playing early that you're afraid of. And then Nana coming down, or Nana, whichever one, she comes down and she does the same thing, but it's when you play her and she's a 3/3 body, and you can return it, you discard a card to return a chosen character with cost 2 or less to their player's hand. So these just letting you, what you're trying to do is you're trying to not lose to aggro, and you're trying to not lose to purple steel while you get your things going in late game, because this deck does not suffer in late game. When you have Amethyst Chromicon, when you have control with Prince Philip combos and Clarabelle, Hades to clear targets, and then you Bend to My Will, so you keep your 15 cards in hand, your opponent gets nothing, it feels good. there's just a couple things. When you run Nana and Maleficent, you really have to find those draw engines to really just not lose. So you see that Dark Wings has included Show Me More, because now when you have Maleficent or Nana in hand, what happens is on your turn 2, you play Show Me More or Amethyst Chromicon, so you have the cards to be able to discard with those 2 cards. And then you just go into late game and control the board from there. I think this is a really neat list. It doesn't run the shift packages, so it's definitely a different way to play, and I could see where it might suffer into late game. So I'd be really curious to hear what Dark Wings lost to in top 8. But I really think this is a really cool list that if you have a lot of purple steel in your meta, I think this would be a great way to beat them. Just saying. But Dark Wings, if you do see this, I'd really like to know what you lost to in Top Cut, because I can't imagine it was a faster purple steel deck. Moving on though, we've got Tournament City, and this is one of the events that did not have a first place list. They also did not have a 4th place list, but they did have red purple. So I had to showcase it because red purple, our boy Garrick, one of the best creators in the business, in my opinion. If you guys have not watched this stuff, you need to go watch it. It's really well done with great editing and commentary. But the list, this is what I'm talking about with red purple, being able to come in and just beat the crap out of purple steel and have enough juice to do really well into these other big name lists, because you play a 1-drop, you play a 2-drop, you play a 3-drop, you turn sideways, you have these annoying things like Headless Horseman that also quests for 2 but is destroying things like genies and Vincenzos, right? You can play a Headless Horseman to destroy a Vincenzo, banish. You have Demona to refill your hand but also make your opponent turn sideways. Then Library, so now you can go 1, 2, 3, and then you could play something like a genie, and then on turn 5 you play a library and start moving stuff into the library so you can get a bunch of draw. Then you have Hercules. Shout out to my buddy Vince, because this is a card that I thought was dead. I've seen Vince playing it at locals, and the amount of times that it reminds me of Emerald Chromicon. People just don't know what to do when you play a Hercules. Hercules is a 5/3/2. It's a 4-cost uninkable. This character can't be dealt damage unless he's being challenged. While this character is exerted, your other hero characters can't be dealt damage unless they're being challenged. There's not a lot of other heroes in this deck, right? We have Sisu, which is a hero, and Dumbo, which is a hero, as well as Elsa, which is a hero. That's enough, right? But you don't even necessarily care about that effect. It's the fact that he can't be dealt damage unless he's being challenged. So now these characters, though, can challenge. You play Hercules, and then you can do these things, and you can challenge with Sisu and Elsa and Dumbo, and you don't take damage. It's pretty bonkers, right? And then songs also can't remove them now. They have to be challenged to be removed or bounced, right? So a lot of really cool things with red purple, and I mentioned it earlier. I think red purple is really going to make a resurgence. It's not dead. All right, really good job, Garrick. And then finally we have the Czech Open, and then one more. So Czech, stick with me. We've got Czech Open. We've got Blurple taking first place. So Blurple is still alive and well, beating out Purple Steel. Now, isn't that something we're used to seeing? Unless you're Frank Karsten, all right? But looking at it, we've got Ying taking first place with a lot of the things we'd expect to see and some of the things we wouldn't. All right. So one thing that we still see the elephants, those elephants probably putting in a lot of work against Purple Steel. I'd be curious if Ying expected a lot of Purple Steel to be there. But then we've got the one Cheshire Cat. Again, it's kind of like that bell, but it can kind of stick around, and then you can use it when you need. So you'll see that he went 1 Cheshire Cat and 3 bells, because they do what they do a little bit differently. Couple things: bell, of course, questing for 2 and moving 3 damage, but you can play Cheshire Cat and then move damage as many times as you want. So when you're running a bunch of things like Iago's that has a lot of health, you could probably use that effect quite a few times. Otherwise, we're running Demona, so now you have Elsa and Demona and Hades to really kind of stop your opponent from stalling the game. And then you have Monstro, 3 Monstros coming in to help clear the board when you have so much draw with things like Demona, and like Genie and Dumbo, and then the new card, Junior Woodchuck Guidebook. You pay 2 to play it, and then you pay 1 to banish this item and draw 2 cards. So a lot of stuff going on. I really like the list. You have Sudden Scare for late game as an instant removal. It's like a 5th Hades. And then the 9 turn 2 ramps with 1 jump ahead, because again, let's not lose on turn 2. I think it's a really neat list. Again, Blurple is just trying to get its legs out underneath them, right? And figure out, how do I beat this wide open meta? And guys, when you can play a 4-drop on turn 3, the deck's not going anywhere, okay? They just have to figure out how they want to do it. And then finally, we got Rip Lungs taking first place at the Collectors Expo. I think they only had a couple lists posted for 23 people, but this is that mid-range tempo list. Shout out to Mo for really breaking through and showing people the possibilities with this. And then you see Rip Lungs taking it and doing well with it. Zane also did really well with it at the Collectors Expo, winning one of the events he was in, or doing really well at least. But what's going on with this is you just have a lot of this mid-range tempo type stuff. You have Flynn Rider getting you some early questing in, and you know, that boost effect is really nice, because with boost, what's able to happen is you can boost it as many times as you want. Maybe you boost it turn 1 and then turn 2, and then maybe you boost it again turn 3, and then you bounce it with Madam Mim, and it's like you drew 3 cards on turn 4. That's pretty good. And then you gain 4 lore as well. The Ursula coming in to rip songs, stop your opponent's Prince Philip combos. Cheshire Cats, again, you can bounce that to get some cards. The Kayla is really nice, something that I've been really interested in and looking a lot at. They pay 1 ink. This character gets +1 attack this turn. So able to really stall your opponent from doing stuff, because if you have a Kayla down and Cheshire Cat down, then you can pay some ink, you can challenge some stuff as high as you want, and it has 5 health, so it probably lives, and then you can move even more damage with Cheshire Cat. And then we see Rip Lungs rocking the Louis, which is a really nice card. It's really nice against aggro. One of the more interesting picks. I'm not sure how much you really care to hit with that, but probably a top. From what I remember from the stream, there was a lot of aggro there, so it probably put in a lot of work. And then, of course, the Prince Philip combo. That Prince Philip combo just being what makes Green Tempo possible, in my opinion, because now you can play all these cards that do all these things, but you always have that be prepared in your back pocket. You always have that way to play Prince Philip on 3. Seeing Malicious, Mean, and Scary whenever you want, and then shift for 6 to clear the entire board. So I really like where Green Purple Tempo is going. I've been playing a lot of it with Brainiac, so some really interesting things in our future. But ladies and gentlemen, that is everything. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was a lot. There was a lot of lists to look at. There was a lot of stuff going on, and just huge shout out to everyone for actually posting their lists to Inktex, because it helps a lot. So again, if you think the meta's been solved, I can't tell you enough how wrong you are. There's going to be a lot of changes, because right now, where there's so many plausible decks and so many things that are unexplored, it's just not. It's just not. And I can't stress that enough. So do not doom and gloom, ladies and gentlemen, because we got some crazy Lorcana ahead of us. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember, if you did, it would mean the world to me if you liked, subscribed, all that fun stuff. Oscar wants to say hello really quick. But ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of it. Remember, stay happy and healthy. I'll see you around, all right?